This is the story of a local newspaper and the community it serves. A local bus is taking the people of the countryside, the people of village and farmstead, into their market town.
The year is 1952. The film is called Local Newspaper. But these pictures were never meant to be seen by English audiences. They're part of a government information film designed to teach foreigners about the British way of life. The busy market town is Newbury in Berkshire.
Once a week, on market day, the town becomes the business place of the farming community. The crowds who fill the streets and jostle round the stalls in the main square are there to do the family shopping. Here in Newbury and the district which surrounds it, you will find an ordinary country community of industrious, hard-working people. Their way of life is reflected week by week in the pages of their local newspaper, the Newbury Weekly News.
The paper was always produced to come out on the market day, locally always known as Pig and Paper Day. I remember the cattle being driven up the street by porters, some in front, some at the back, stop them going into shops, and very often they did run amok.
Farmers, auctioneers, machinery dealers, corn merchants all met and did their business. And many a business deal was done by the shake of a hand in those days. Not all the farmers who came in were competent at reading and writing. We used to write their checks for them and they would sign them. It was a very pleasant and a very social occasion as well.
The pubs in the market area stayed open. Of course, there was a lot of boisterous gambling after the market had finished, of people playing cards and dice and that sort of thing in the pubs. And generally, it was a day to be reckoned with in the town. Everyone who was everyone came into town for market day.
The cattle and pigs are long gone, but the Newbury News is still published on market day. It's produced in the shadow of the main trunk road from the Midlands to the Channel ports on the banks of the Kennet and Avon Canal.
Brian, have you seen this story?
Yes, I have.
About the long. Do you think it's worth the front?
Yes, I think so, because the picture has got the farmers in it, which is very good. There's not many nationals have had that picture. They mostly have her and the baby.
Right. He's the one with the beard, is he, presumably? Yeah. OK, well, we'll hang on to it for the front page and hope that it doesn't get displaced by something else.
While other local papers have died or have been swallowed up, the Newbury News has flourished. It has become one of the largest independent newspaper groups in the country. As well as the weekly paper, which regularly runs to more than 60 pages, there is a monthly business review, a free sheet which is distributed to 35,000 homes, and a quarterly colour magazine. It's come a long way since 1952, when the printing press was supervised by Bob Hockey.
It was an old family firm in those days, and rather different setup to what it is now. And we fitted in all sorts of little things because paper was rationed in those days, newsprint, and we could only do 6 pages one week and 8 the next.
The old hot metal linotype machines were the province of Jack Burton.
We got by, although they were rather noisy, cumbersome, and they did go off rather a lot of lead fumes. Most days we had a little minor catastrophe, splashing of hot metal here, there and everywhere. Something went wrong, but by and large they were an improvement on the old composing, but of course nothing like modern day technology.
Doug Penn was just an apprentice.
We started on a very low wage, about 25 shillings a week or something like that. The apprentices were expected to work all night sometimes. For about 2 or 6 an hour it would be at that rate, I would think. That meant coming in Wednesday morning and work doing your normal job all day, and then go packing perhaps at night and work till 7:30 next morning, back home for a few hours rest, and then back in, Thursday morning start again.
Reg Blake, now chairman, was a reporter.
It was a good life, yes. It was fairly relaxed, but it was pretty hard. Long hours, and I used to have to travel around on a bicycle in the early days, cycling perhaps 15 miles to report a flower show. But it's a very different kettle of fish these days.
Back in 1952, the editor lived on the town's main shopping street. A small office for taking in advertising on the site of his old home is the only reminder of the post-war newspaper.
Its editor is a familiar figure, Mr. Hugh Turner. He's a big, friendly man whose father started the paper over 80 years ago. He knows his readers intimately, and they know him as a man who will only print what he believes to be the truth. Just off the main street are the offices of the newspaper, and over the office is Mr. Turner's home. In fact, his dining room is also his office. From here, he directs the running of the paper. His chief reporter, Mr. Willis, who has been with the paper for 35 years, has come to consult him. The paper is independent, and Mr. Turner is responsible for its policy. His decisions are not influenced by any political party or outside financial interests.
I think over 20 years in being in the business, I think that's what makes a good local paper. You can be a good local paper without being independent, but I think being independent is the most important thing. That means that you're free from all kinds of outside influences. And as an editor, your job is simply to produce the best product you can.
In the reporter's room, where Mr. Willis works, the newspaper really begins. It's his job to see that the news is gathered in. Every day, information from the surrounding countryside comes in by post and by telephone. But the chief work of collecting the news falls on the individual reporter. For news of interest to women, a woman's approach. This reporter is off with the photographer to cover a local wedding. She'll take down details of the ceremony, describe the bride's dress, name the guests. Any local event of interest to the paper's readers is news. Local sport is news. A violin recital given by a member of the town's women's guild is news.
From the Newbury Weekly News, Thursday, March the 27th, 1952. 80 members of the Old Folks Club were entertained at the parish hall on March the 19th by Mr. and Mrs. Wills of Sutton Courtenay with their marionettes.
St Mary's Parochial Church Council last week decided to go forward with the work of treating timbers in the church tower, where beetle ravage has occurred.
A record company of
A research
260
committee from
attended the
Princess
annual dinner and dance of the Newbury, Hungerford and Marlborough District Grocers Association at the Chequers Hotel on Wednesday last week.
Council meetings were also news. Newbury was a borough, proud of its independence. When the film was made, Jack Hole had just completed his term as mayor.
They were nearly all shopkeepers, professional men, who were talking to their burgesses, they call them, their customers, over the counter. They come in for a loaf of bread and say, "What are you doing about the potholes in our road?" You know, it was as close as that. And after they'd walk out of the shop, you ring up this borough surveyor and say, "What are you doing about the potholes in Craven Road?" He says, "Oh, it's in next year's estimates." I said, "What about it now? There's holes." "All right, we send along, fill in those holes." And that was the end of the matter. It was dealt with there and then.
A good meaty issue like potholes in the road could keep a local paper in business for weeks. Here, a reporter is on his way to another story when he spots an accident across the street.
Only a minor one, and nobody's badly hurt, except the bicycle. But it's a bad corner. There have been a number of accidents there recently. He takes a few notes. Mr. Turner, the editor, is just starting his lunch when the reporter's story about the street accident is brought into him. He's interested. For a long time, he's been urging the town council to put traffic control lights at this particular corner. After lunch, he goes with the reporter and studies the scene of the accident.
And so, a story which might merit a couple of column inches at most becomes potent ammunition in a full-blown campaign.
We are a reporting newspaper and not a campaigning newspaper. We campaign very infrequently, so that when we campaign successfully. When we write an editorial, when I write an editorial, when we run a campaign, people tend to take notice of it. If you, in fact, run a campaign every week, then nobody takes the blindest bit of notice.
We campaign when necessary. If it's a story with two sides, we always report two sides. If it's a story where people are up in arms, as recently over the hospitals which were to be closed in Newbury, then we campaign as hard as we can, and in fact we went to the trouble of organising a protest meeting in Newbury.
Whether the paper's present-day campaign to save its local hospitals is successful remains to be seen. Back in 1952, Mr. Turner's campaign suffered a setback when the council debated a proposal to install traffic lights on the dangerous corner. They voted it down. But at that time, his readers were probably far more concerned by a very real threat to their livelihoods.
The cattle market is closed, and there will be no auction today, March the 27th, 1952. Calves will be accepted for slaughter and must be accompanied by a movement license.
I recall that 1952 was, in fact, the worst year we ever had for foot and mouth disease outbreaks. The first outbreak was at the end of March in 1952, and we were closed intermittently right through the year until October. There was one particularly serious series of 5 outbreaks in the Compton-Albert area, and over 1,600 cattle and sheep were destroyed.
In the post-war years, much more than today, anything which affected life in the surrounding farms and villages was keenly felt in Newbury itself.
A great deal of Newbury trade was supplying the farmers with their fertilizers, with their feed, taking their produce, selling them produce. You knew them. The villages were all, in a kind of way, offshoots from the town itself. Each village was a part of the town in a kind of way.
That intimacy was reflected in the pages of the Newbury News, which reported surrounding village life in great detail.
During the week, the people of the district have read in the daily newspapers from the larger cities the news of national importance, news of distant places and big events. In their own weekly newspaper, they look forward to the local news, the news that's about them and the events which directly affect their day-to-day life.
A certain amount of juvenile delinquency in the village was how the rector, the Reverend C.G. Harding, described certain events in the village, including damage to the playing fields at Inkpen Parish meeting last week.
The correspondent in the village of Inkpen was Peggy Cruz, a young school teacher who had ambitions to become a journalist.
She's heard that the local dramatic society has started rehearsals of a play. She watches the rehearsal with the producer and finds out details of the play and who's taking part in it. At home that evening, she writes her story for the newspaper.
I was a member of the Women's Institute. I was quite a young woman then, of course, and there was no news going in, and Women's Institutes had correspondence, and I became the correspondent for the Women's Institute. That was in 1949. I've still got an old programme. But then I found that there wasn't much news from the village in the paper, so I started sending little paragraphs in and found they were published, and then asked if I could become the correspondent, and I was taken on, and it was really arose from that.
Inkpen's March meeting was at Newmill. A representative of the Singer Sewing Company and 2 assistants gave an interesting demonstration. A competition for a tea cosy was won by Mrs. B. Carter. A pair of nylons was won by Mrs. Hunt.
It was always in my bones to write, but I never had the opportunity. It was very difficult to get into journalism then, as it probably is today, but I started this writing and sending these little village paragraphs in, like who heard the first nightingale and who won the prizes at the village whist drive and how many wasps' nests had been found that year. And in the end, I was taken on and I did become a staff reporter on the Newbury Weekly News. And since then, I've had a career in journalism.
The Inkpen Women's Institute, where Peggy's career began, is still going strong. But the post of press officer is vacant, so their activities are no longer regularly reported in the newspaper's WI Roundup.
A paper like the Newbury Weekly seems to be outstanding in its village reporting. Everybody reads it from cover to cover. Especially, if anything's gone on in Inkpen, everybody knows about it. We only feel it falls down on the WI reporting aspect, actually.
Well, look out, chaps.
We've found in past years that no matter what type of report we submit, although the meeting might be very interested and varied, the reports tend to get condensed into a standard WI format, and it doesn't make interesting reading, we feel.
The voice of one village WI president raised in complaint may not carry much weight, but it'll be heard. One of the facts of life if you work on a local newspaper is that you are never allowed to forget your roots.
We live among the people who read the paper, so we queue at the bank and our kids go to school together. So, I mean, if the Newbury News starts to stray off its path, then we very soon get to hear about it. Our wives hear about it in the supermarket, and we hear about it at the golf club and the rugby club. So it's a continuing discussion with our readers all the time.
The close, sometimes cosy relationship between a local paper and its readers is most severely tested by a major tragedy. At the time of the Hungerford massacre, the Newbury News had to balance news values against local sensibilities in a way that the national press did not.
All the people who were affected by the Hungerford massacre were Newbury Weekly News readers. And so there is a continuing relationship, whereas with the national papers, they arrive these days in their helicopters, make an awful lot of noise, misreport the whole event, and then disappear again. And we're left nursing the image of newspapers in the community.
The measure of the paper's success is that it received just one complaint over its Hungerford coverage. Editorial considerations aside, that is also good for business. The Newbury News depends on its customers, not just the people who buy the paper, but also those who buy space in it, and so provide 90% of its revenue.
All this time, the paper's advertising manager has also been at work, arranging for shops and other commercial concerns to take advertising space. As well as the large advertisements, there are scores of small ones that are of great interest to the readers. For instance, they learn that young Mr. Brown wants to sell his motorcycle, as he's now the proud owner of a small car. Or that Mr. Jackson's beekeeping venture is a success, as he's advertising for sale large quantities of honey.
For sale, ladies' saddle, safety straps and leathers, as new.
Morris 12 Saloon, 1936, exceptionally clean, 200.
Vacuum sweeper, good condition, all parts, £5.
Man wanted for kitchen garden. House on bus route. Apply P. Gallop, The Gardens,
to help
Hampstead
nanny.
Marshall.
2 children, country near Newbury.
Trusses,
Comfortable accommodation.
surgical aids, and elastic hosiery. Expertly fitted by our trained staff of surgical technicians.
There is a great readership value in classified advertising. People will look for the bargain. People with items to sell want to get an idea and a price and a structure for what they want to sell it at. I think if you were looking for a new car to get a sounding board, you would look through the local newspaper to see what sort of prices were going at. And I tend to think, too, that if on your way home tonight you saw an estate agent's board in your neighbour's garden, you might well look at the local newspaper to see what it was going for.
In rural surroundings overlooking the Downs, a well-modernised country cottage with 3 bedrooms, bathroom, 2 good sitting rooms, kitchen with Arga, garden and grounds about 3/4 of an acre, £3,900.
Cycle your fares away on a new bike from Curry's. Models from £12, 10 shillings, or 4 and 6 weekly.
The newest Paris suit, a clever little jacket with a momentous whirling, twirling skirt, fabulous fullness folded in soft roll pleats, created in a new, beautiful blended rayon wool fabric in a range of exciting new colours, and perfect in black and navy. £6, 19 shillings and sixpence. Camp Hobson.
Local businesses are still the major source of advertising revenue, so the newspaper's fortunes are intimately bound up with the fortunes of Newbury itself. Since 1952, the town has expanded and prospered, almost in spite of itself.
In the early 1950s, there was a tremendous demand for housing from London, from the GLC and the LCC. And as you may know, Basingstoke and Andover were virtually repopulated by London population and rebuilt. Newbury and Swindon also came under scrutiny. Swindon took nearly all the GLC development for this area, and Newbury escaped, if that's the right word.
Resisting instant growth in the 50s, Newbury might have become nothing more than a sleepy backwater, but simple geography prevented it. The town has always stood at a crossroads. In the 19th century, at a point where the road north from the Channel coast crossed the great east-west artery of the Kennet and Avon Canal. In the 20th, a motorway replaced the canal, and the towns strung along it became magnets for new industry. Even in Newbury, the change was irresistible.
Newbury has grown in spite of itself, and it's fought quite hard not to grow. But the arrival of people like Bayer and Sony, the development of industrial sites around Thatcham, has meant that it's become a very significant area for growth. Indeed, the second fastest growing town in England to Milton Keynes.
By and large, the buildings have changed. That's the main change. We have the Kennet Centre now. Formerly, that was little shops selling all sorts of knickknacks, cottles and needles, boot polish, all the little things that the housewife requires, which now you have a job to find in the town like Newbury. Somehow, old Newbury is missing.
People who are my generation or before loved the town as it was, a small country town. And it could be any town almost now, but there are bits of the town which are still the character of the old. I think Newbury is worthwhile still.
In those days, it was very much of a craft. You had to learn your job, your skill. And we had good teachers, and we always had good friends and good mates there, and we were taught well. And I think that's a good base for what's built today. It's a foundation of all that's come after that, really. It's a good local paper, and we like it.